All right, hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with Matt, my co-host. We are back live this week. After last week, we had to record an episode. I had my son. He's healthy. Everything's going good. So I'm going to use that as my high tempo. If you haven't heard, that's why I was out last week. We were at the hospital, and everything's going good. Mom and baby are well. So I'm happy to be back. And I know, Matt, you have a good high tempo this week, so why don't you go ahead and get into it?
Yeah, I wanted to give you that congrats on air for the
Thank you.
Continuing the lineage. My high tempo this week, I got killed about it before. I trusted the process. The Philadelphia 76ers playoff eligible this year. For the first time since like 2008, they made the playoffs. You got Markelle Fultz, who came back from his injury, saw some playing time. There's a little bit of excitement. There's actually something to start watching some games for now, aside from Embiid talking some trash over his social media.
Well, I'll be honest. Whenever they said they were going to go ahead and do that, you can't be 100% sure trusting the process. But if there is one sport where it will work, it's basketball, because you only really need a handful of guys. You've heard it the past couple years. You need a big three. So you just need three solid all-star maybe level players, maybe not even that, to compete and win a championship. So it'll be interesting to see if the Sixers can go ahead and parlay this into something that ultimately forces LeBron out of the East. A lot of the media types want him to go west. And if he does, that's going to open up the path. They could easily be in LeBron's position where they're in the finals every year. And once you get in the finals, it's one series, so you could get lucky. You want to add something?
Speaking of the LeBron issues, is he really like running the Cleveland Cavaliers right now? Like, if he's really like actually making changes and like getting assistant coaches and the head coach like fired, that has to be one of the all-time stupidest GM moves that I've ever seen, because they've traded away a pile of players. They're getting rid of coaches. It's like eventually it all goes back to one person, and it's not like you're dealing with 25-year-old LeBron James. You're dealing with mid-30s LeBron James, who like at any point could just say, you know what, I've won my championships. I've had like he's at a point where he can walk away at any given year. Why would you like try to cater to him at this point in his career? I don't know.
I'll tell you, it reminds me of, I think he is running the team, but it reminds me of Pony League. And I don't know if that's something that's nationwide, but where we're from, Pony League was kind of a summer league run by each town or whatever, each team, or maybe we called it Legion. It was like sponsored by the American Legion, and they had their own teams, and they would trade players and do like you had to sign a contract and things like that. But if you weren't doing well, they would kind of move you along teams. I know Rick's not on here, but he's one of the ones that ended up playing for a neighboring town just because of that inner politics. And I feel like that's how LeBron's running his team. You don't fit in so well, we're just going to get rid of you. Who cares about the consequence? That's what it feels like to me. It's like a Summer Legion team where you really don't care. You're just there to have fun. Some guys take it way too serious. And so they think by just picking and choosing players and having them rearrange, you'll have a chance for a championship. Instead of actually building a team, becoming friends, working, trying to learn each other's tendencies. That's not what he's doing. He's kind of just like, you're here for a month, and you're here for a month. Oh, I don't know about you. Maybe we'll push you out. And it's like the Kevin Love thing. I don't know if you saw this. I don't think we mentioned it on the show. But he came out and said that he has, is it anxiety or something? He has some kind of disorder where he's like, look, of course I don't get along. I'm not good at talking with people. And he had to come out and say it because he knew he was on the chopping block. So just weird that a team sport, like a professional sport worth millions of dollars, would just let one guy call the shots.
Yeah, and I think it adds to the fire of the NBA being a more self-centered league, where if one person like that is able to pull in, like where you're seeing all the super teams that were being formed, where the single eye players like the Durants, like the LeBrons, that can just say, I'm going to pick and choose where I want to go, and kind of have this polarizing effect on the rest of their teammates. I think it's an interesting contrast to see, looking at the way that those teams have been playing, and now you have the upstarts like how Houston is now coming up. You have the Sixers, who are now potentially going to be a competitive force. I think if they stay healthy, they're teams that they could potentially make a run this year in the playoffs.
I agree, and there's not a lot of strong teams. I mean, in the NBA, I think there's worse parity than other sports. People say with the NFL, there's no parity. It's Tom Brady or the Steelers from the AFC every year, and then whatever else. But in the NBA, it's not really so much of the teams as it is the players. It's whatever team LeBron is on wins the East. So you can't say, oh, well, look, it's different teams. It's Miami and it's Cleveland. Nah, those are both LeBron. And he's been in the finals how many handful of times? Look back at Kobe's Lakers. How many times did Kobe get them in the finals? So it's more of a players' league, which can go ahead and dispel the illusion that it's not a team-by-team thing for parity sake. But it's definitely on par, if not way worse, than the NFL on the top. So anything else you want to add before we kick into the Steel City update?
Just excited to see, for a change, having something a little bit different watching basketball now that we're in kind of a dead period.
Yeah, we'll definitely be bringing stuff in. We have some extra sports on the docket today, but we'll get into the Steel City update. First thing I want to look at were the Penguins. That's going to be coming up. I toyed around with doing a preview for the playoffs, but it's too early for that. Penguins are sitting tight, second in the Metropolitan Division, 92 points. I think they're firmly in. Right now, they'd be fifth if it started today. They haven't clinched, like, say, the Lightning. 6-2-2 in their last 10. They're still looking at that 4-5 seed matchup. Right now, the Caps are tied with the Maple Leafs in fourth. So depending on how their games go, they might not end up playing the Caps in the first round. So we're going to go ahead and keep a look on this. I didn't want to get into it because the matchups are going to change pretty drastically so far, at least in the East, because you have the Blue Jackets and Flyers both tied at 89 points, and then the next team would be the Devils at 86. So there might be some movement there. Am I worried that the Penguins are going to miss the playoffs? No, not really. But just because of some other things that are on the show for this week, we're going to kind of play it low-key before we get into the playoffs, because that's going to be our main focus coming into April, especially because the Penguins are coming for their third championship in a row. But we'll see what happens, and that will be coming up soon, so I didn't want to spend too much time on that today, because I feel like probably next week might be a tad bit too early, but at least we'll have a clearer picture, so we'll definitely be hitting on that. This week we have a couple extra things. Just because
they're also down right now, 3-1. Playing Detroit.
They were. I was tied 1-1 whenever I last looked before we started.
End of the second period.
So that's not good, because I don't want them to slip. What I don't want is them to slip and have to play a hot team with Murray coming back and not having as much game experience. You really don't want them to play the Lightning or someone like the Bruins, who have over 100 points already on the season with about a couple games. 6 games left? I don't even know what the Penguins have. I think it is. You're looking at today. Now they have 5 games left. So tonight is the 6th, I guess, whenever I looked at it. So, but they have a chance to move up. They do play the Caps. Do I think they'll catch them and win the Metropolitan? No. It just hasn't worked. They've been able to keep steady. I mean, you're still facing a killer Ovechkin. He's looking to get stuff done. And it's going to be crazy if that's what ends up happening early in the playoffs with the matchup-wise. Going on to baseball, we're going to hit on Major League Baseball opening day. Rick was at spring training. I wasn't sure if he was going to make it back to the show for this week's show, but he sent me some other videos. I'm not going to play them this week, but I am going to go ahead and put them on our social media, all his hot takes for spring training, and I'll probably put it out on the Southbound Sports Report with the birth of my son. I haven't really been getting into any more of those or lately, so I need to get back into the groove, and I'm going to go ahead and put Rick's takes up from spring training right before the Major League Baseball season. I'll be putting that up on the Southbound Sports Report, so make sure you subscribe to that on iTunes. That will probably be going up tomorrow or Thursday, and I'll probably going to be covering the Frozen Four and the Final Four a good bit because Michigan's in it. So that'll be something that we're going to talk about today, but I'll be hitting on there. So follow the Southbound Sports Report, and we'll definitely be doing NFL draft coverage night by night for there on there. That's a way we do shorter shows, maybe 15 minutes, but we can hit on one topic and really go into detail as it happens. So that will be our Major League Baseball. We'll hit on that a little bit later in the show. And for the Steelers, I have to bring it up. I hate talking about it. I feel like we talk about Le'Veon Bell every week. Steelers have ended, at least whenever I was doing the research for the show. I've been kind of out of it this past week. They've ended contract talks, before the draft. They said, we're going to focus on the draft. We're not going to worry about extending you. They didn't get the deal done that they wanted and able to go ahead and get basically something in place for the draft. Matt, do you think there's a possibility they could go after running back?
Absolutely. If following Pittsburgh has taught us anything, it's don't think that they won't go after. They're going to set up their board, and they're going to have their people that if the right pick falls in the right place, they absolutely will take a running back. To me, I almost think that if the right running back, if they have their eye, I know everyone says it's linebacker because of the injury to Shazier, because there's not a younger stopgap really available. If the linebacker doesn't fall to them where they're at, why not take a flyer if the quarterback that you're looking at doesn't pan out? Because there's some potential rumors that the quarterback from Oklahoma State, Mason Rudolph, could be a possibility that I think might be a good fit in Pittsburgh. I like some of the running back prospects that are out there right now, and I think that it might be a good thing to have a younger back because Bell has missed games every single year. Whether they sign him or they don't, they still need to have someone there to handle the workload.
Yeah, and with Ben, you can get in. If you're going to go with the quarterback route, you can he's so experienced that you can get rid of a running back. Even if he's a game break running back, Ben's still going to be able to make plays to get you to win games. Offense hasn't been the problem. New offensive coordinator coming in, so he's not familiar with Bell. So you're going to look at it from a couple different ways. Is it really going to be that big of a loss? We don't know in the grand scheme of things. We've seen it before where a new offensive coordinator completely changes the offense, and maybe the schemes don't work for that style of running back.
I would be surprised if Pittsburgh's offense looks very different. I almost think with where Ben's at in his career, if he didn't like the direction that the offense was in, he would just walk away. I think with pushing Haley out, I think that he's going to it'll be almost like when Tom Brady went to Denver, how he was able
Peyton
to.
Manning.
Yeah, whoever.
Tom Brady, the GOAT. You can't mistake those two. One owns pizza franchises and one owns 5 Super Bowl rings, Matt.
I'm tired of hearing both of them. But when Manning was out in Denver, it's been a long week. When Manning went to Denver, he was able to manipulate the playbook quite a bit, and I think probably Brady has that same level of flexibility. Once Charlie Wise left New England, that with McDaniels to whoever to back to McDaniels, it's pretty much the system's in place, and these guys that have been running it long enough have such a say-so because they're going to run what feels comfortable for them, and everyone else has to adjust. So I do think that that you're probably going to see similar things, which may help in Pittsburgh's case, because if Ben's going to be throwing 40, 45 times a game, then you're not going to need that bell cow running back, so to speak, to carry 40 times. You're only going to have so many possessions a game, and if Ben's going to be throwing more, throwing those perimeter screens and things like that, then it kind of takes away from your running game.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. It's going to be an interesting we'll see when the draft shakes out, but it's going to be an interesting preseason or training camp. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get up there for that or not. Sometimes my family and I take a trip out there, but we'll see. We're going to keep an eye on that. Anything else you want to add for Pittsburgh sports before we move on?
Just, it's been relatively quiet, which I think is typical for Pittsburgh. For as crazy as that beginning week is, I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how some of these play out. You had some of the pro days, and I don't know that there were many people that kind of helped or hurt their stance. I know we're going to get into some of this maybe a little bit later in the show, so I'm not going to tip off too much about our pro days and people competing.
All right, next thing on this show, I put on here the Frozen Four. I put it above the Final Four just to stretch that out a little bit for you, Matt. But the Frozen Four I wanted to highlight because I don't see too much on it talked about the sports media. And this is something that I think right now the Big Ten has expanded. I've mentioned it before, but if you're new to the show, the Big Ten Conference didn't have a hockey league at all. They when they started the Big Ten Network, most of the teams that played Division I hockey, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, I think there was only a handful of them, Ohio State and Wisconsin maybe. They didn't have enough teams to form their own conference, so they were in, I think, the CCHA conference, which was kind of like a Northeastern conference. So when the Big Ten Network was formed, they came together and said, hey, this is another revenue for us in TV dollars. We can show these when there's not basketball games. Let's try to make a conference. So they invited, Penn State had a donor step in. And that's what we started talking about it on the show, just because we're a Pittsburgh-based show. I know Rick's usually on. He's a big hockey fan. Talk some Penn State stuff. And me, with my Michigan background, just looking at it, it's turning into a pretty good rivalry just across the conference. But seeing it on the grand scale, I think ESPN picked these games up. And this year, 2018, Frozen Four got finalized on Sunday. Ohio State plays Minnesota Duluth on one side of the Final Four, and then Big Ten teams Michigan and Notre Dame are on the other side. So 3 of the 4 in the Frozen Four are from the Big Ten. Because what you're going to see happen is you have one conference in hockey that's going to start getting TV dollars, and they're going to be able to recruit nationally. So I just wanted to bring this up that you might see other conferences step in. One I could look at, and I could see, Matt, would be the ACC. Maybe not the Florida schools, but in the Big Ten, you don't have all the schools compete. I think you only need 6, because when Penn State added, they had their own conference. This year, was the first year they added Notre Dame. And then actually, the Big Ten is bringing in Arizona State. But there are some teams, I think, like Boston College, I'm pretty sure already has a great team they're consistently already in the ACC. They could lure back Notre Dame possibly, and you could start to have your own competing conferences just in hockey. And this is something that I bring up because of the Pittsburgh Penguins type deal. Pittsburgh Penguins, when they had their resurgence drafting Sid Crosby, they kind of did a renewed minor league type thing in the area to bring kids up playing hockey. Because it wasn't something, there weren't hockey leagues. I remember when I was in high school, we didn't have a hockey team. There was no way to play. I know a couple high schools in the area now definitely have hockey teams. There went from being 0 ice rinks to what? They built 2 within a 5-year time frame when we were kids. And I think there might be a third just in our area in Pennsylvania. So it's something where if this picks up, it could be a big help for the NHL. I don't know if you saw in that, but one of the players came out and said, hey, we need to stop marketing to middle-aged, I think he said white guys, and start to get a younger demographic, because our sport's going to die as these old white guys die. And because that's all who's watching. So the NHL is definitely looking for new avenues, and I think this would be a way. A lot of people already have attachments to college teams due to football. So when basketball season rolls around, they see their team, they cheer for it, they have some attachment. Here's another sport where the tournament's going on the same time as the March Madness deal. So if your team's eliminated and they have a hockey team, you might have another avenue to cheer from, because the Frozen Four doesn't kick off until after the basketball national championship, I believe. I think that's April 2nd. And I think the Frozen Four starts April 5th on ESPN2. So I just wanted to give some insight on that. If you're a Pittsburgh guy or a Pennsylvania guy, you're a Penn State fan, definitely check it out. They have a new team. This is their 3rd year, I think their 3rd or 4th year in Division I, and they were a game away from the Frozen Four. I know Rick predicted that they would make it. They just missed out. Who'd they lose to? They lost to someone. They would have ended up having to play Ohio State. I think they lost to Denver. And Denver's been a solid program, so I just wanted to bring that up. You have anything to add, Matt?
I'm just going to say on the flip side of that, I don't think that it's gonna pick up, because when you look at some of the major sports, hockey still kind of trails in the NHL. All of the other professional leagues, they don't get the Sports Center airtime. They fight an uphill battle from the very top. When the top program, the top professional league is struggling to make national airtime, I think it's going to hurt some of these other schools. And I think when you're looking at the finances, the financial end of things, and you're looking at the Title IX or whatever, where if you're going to put in for some of the schools, maybe, and you're looking at, like, say, the ACC, for them to add men's hockey, then they have to add women's hockey. And then not only that, but now you're looking at the infrastructure of how are they going to play on those games? How are you going to divide the facilities, and all that extra money that's going to go into just getting that program off the ground, and then trying to compete with the established programs like you have in the Big Ten that clearly have a stronghold right now. It would be for the interest of a school like the Big Ten to try to add more teams, because it would make them look better. But I don't think from an ACC standpoint, why would you want to try to get a hockey program off the ground when hockey's not as big, especially when with some of the southern schools, you have spring football, you have extra 7-on-7 things that you can be doing. There's baseball year round. I think it's going to take away from those athletes, and they may struggle to build that demographic in the southern states as opposed to up north where, some people grow up playing it.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't know if it's going to ever go that far south, but where I could see it taking off is, let's say NC State here in Raleigh have a club team. They already have an NHL program. If you're an adult in the area and you want to take your kids to a game, your only option to see hockey is paying NHL prices, which are like $40 a ticket. I know you can get secondhand cheaper depending on how they're doing. Where a lot of parents, to introduce their kid into a sport, if you have a professional team, the Pirates are so much. Oh, why don't we go see a minor league club? Why don't we go see a college team? The NHL doesn't have a minor league system that's as robust. I know, like, where we're from, we did have a minor league team, and I know some towns don't, but here in Raleigh, like, we don't, where the NC State, they could step up and take that void and do kind of like right up the Eastern Alley there to connect somewhere with Boston College, where you just get some of these northern teams, maybe say a Virginia or whatever. But I did make a note while you were saying that. You did bring up a good point about Title IX. I would say, I would venture to say that a lot of schools already have more women's sports than men's sports for that reason. And I think that's why, like, Penn State, they didn't add, I don't know, maybe they did add women's hockey. Michigan doesn't have women's hockey. I know that for a fact. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to look at it. Maybe they already have more women's sports. I'll see if I can get a count for next week's show, or even just I'll throw it up on Instagram to see what schools have how many women's versus men's programs, because then it's just a financial thing. And if the Big Ten Network, or let's say the new ACC network, which is going to need content, that's where you can step in and say, hey, we know basketball's king in the ACC, but once you get into the tournament range or during the week, most basketball games are like Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or whatever, or Saturday. Maybe you make hockey Wednesday, Friday nights on the ACC network. It's going to be something that might pick up. So just keep an eye out there. You have anything else to add on that?
No, I think that it may be fighting against the current, trying to push for a sport that isn't. And I think from a financial standpoint too, you look at basketball and it's a ball. Even poor families can afford a ball. Where you look at some of the financial stuff of playing a sport like hockey, where if you're playing in the summer and you're in a roller league, you're getting roller blades. If you're in an indoor league and you're having to buy skates and you're buying pads and that can quickly add up. And if you're coming from a low income family, that's a burden that when you weigh the pros and cons, if I have to spend $300, $400 for equipment compared to $50 for a pair of shoes, or a ball that you can get just about anywhere. Like, I mean, it's definitely a lesser cost of something to consider.
All right, well, I don't want to derail the show too much, so I wrote another note on that. Let's bring this up. We'll get into it a little bit more next week. I'll get some numbers and we can look at them, because I wonder if the big programs, what their revenues are for hockey, and is there a way to make money, or are you right where it does cost much, or like it does hurt them, put them in the black, because they've been really pushing sports like lacrosse, which is an expensive sport for the same reasons like you said. You need a special stick, you need the ball, you need the mask. You can't just go play that with your buddies. You can't just pick up and go, because you could really get hurt. So they're pushing another sport that's year-round to try to attract people, because you don't need, per se, the ice rinks. But if there's only 100 people in the stands versus a hockey game where it's sold out, 8,000 people or whatever Michigan Stadium holds, you're going to make money on that compared to lacrosse where no one shows up. So I'm going to try to get some numbers, and we'll get back into this next week. For now, let's go ahead and kick into the Final Four. Matt, I'll let you give your thoughts. Florida State, Michigan, what'd you think?
I thought it went as well as I didn't anticipated. I said before, I didn't want to play Michigan because I didn't think that they would end up doing as well as they. I didn't think that they had the team to consistently play there. I thought they played well for about a half. And when you got later into the game, there were some really poor shot selections. They were. I understand that they were working the shot clock, but then they were working for the shot, and the shots that they were forcing then were absolutely horrendous at the end. I got to give Coach Hamilton some credit though, because at the end of the game, clearly he was agitated at the way that the game ended. I mean, you had tweeted out his interview, and in the heat of the moment, I couldn't argue like his interview, but I appreciate his character and going back and apologizing, and even the reporter had kind of commented on it as well and said all the interviews and everything leading up to it he was very accommodating and was willing to participate in whatever interview. So, I think that it was good that on his part that he was able to go back and kind of make things right, so to speak.
Matt, did you know that she was a Michigan woman?
Oh, for crying out!
So maybe,
well, Jesus,
maybe he was just.
What'd she do? What'd she do? Buy a bag of chips? She got an admission to Michigan. It's like, Jesus Christ, they got like 1 million people because just hand out admission awards for everyone. Hey, get to go to Michigan. You get to go to Michigan.
Maybe he was just flustered by the expertise that she showed in her field. Excellent reporter. So he was just thrown by the question. He's like, how do you know that we were only down 4 points with 11 seconds to go? But no, we actually went on. Me and Matt FaceTimed during the game, because leading up to it, we both had the same thoughts. Okay, we both have pretty athletic teams. They mentioned Florida State's length because they had that one guy that was 7 foot tall, 4 inches, and you would think that they would just tell him, "Hey, don't ever bring your arms down," because he had 2 stupid fouls early in the game that I think swung the game. There was one, I don't know if it was him. There was a pump fake 3 by Wagner in the corner that I thought, why? Why would you fall for a pump fake there? He would have to drive the whole baseline. He's like a 7 foot guy. They're easily going to stop him. Just keep your hands up. Just stand there. You're 7'4". And it might not even have been him, but they had some other guys with length where I think they just needed to be, and I think it was just, it just looked like they didn't have enough experience with the game. And I don't know, was he a sophomore? Or maybe that's a guy from Kansas.
Well, that was just one of the plays. Those are the kinds of plays that all year had Florida State fans wanting Coach Hamilton to be fired, because I think with them making it as far as they have, it definitely got the dogs off his back. But going into the tournament, there were a lot of people were having them as a 1 and done, maybe 2 and done. They weren't looking to go as far as they did, because they just commit dumb fouls. They do like really boneheaded things from time to time that you scratch your head and think, this team has the athleticism to do better. Why in the world are they acting like they've never played before? But that's just something with the team.
Well, I'll give them credit because they knocked off they knocked off Xavier, which was the 1 seed, and Gonzaga, which was the 4. Or A&M knocked off the 2 seed UNC because they were ESPN was given a stat that Michigan didn't play any top 5 teams because Florida State knocked them all out. Texas A&M knocked them out. So leading up to the game, I told Matt, hey, you should be excited for Florida State because if they get this win, because obviously Michigan's hit or miss. Everyone can hit shots and it could be like Texas A&M where it's a complete blowout and the game's over and they can just kind of coast. Or it could be like Florida State where both teams are missing all of their shots and it's like a sloppy grind fest. What I say, it was like watching a 6th grade basketball game. Where everyone just...
That was the perfect analogy for it because you would think, and I'd messaged this to you before, that it was one of those, if with the way Michigan shot the lights out of A&M, it was like, there's no way that they can continue shooting this way. Like that had to have just been a fluke. And sure enough, they were bricking shots, and then Florida State would run down to the other end, and they would brick a shot. It was like, come on, someone just
I think they both had, 15 turnovers or something, like a piece. It was like 14 and 15 at half or something crazy. Or maybe it was like midway through the second. I was like, good God, double-digit turnovers is crazy. But, what you were saying is about the shots. I was actually hoping that fire would keep going because people that aren't familiar with how the March Madness tournament works is you're playing in 3 different venues usually. So you play a first round venue, which Michigan was very cold in the first round. They were in Wichita, Kansas. So then they moved to LA, shot the lights out, looked like it had a softer rim there. And I was hoping that going into Saturday that would continue, but it definitely didn't. So normally what happens is a team gets on a 2-game run. That's where you might see upsets in the first round. They're hot with a certain rim, or they're hot with a certain venue. Maybe they've played there before. They're from the area because a lot of these are like, let's say, Northern Iowa. They made a run before. I think they were up in Ames or Des Moines, somewhere in Iowa. So they've played there before. They're comfortable, and they're able to get a few games under their belt. But on Saturday, nope. They were not comfortable at the Coliseum. There was a lot of Michigan fans there, which I was impressed with. But anything can happen. And I told Matt that if this happens, there's a good chance both of these teams are going to make it to the national championship. Whoever wins this game is probably going to be in the national championship. Because no knock on Loyola, they haven't played anyone. Their schedule was worse for the tournament than Michigan's. They played Tennessee, which is kind of like a lighter version of Florida State. They're not as big, they're not as athletic, but that's the kind of style they play. So I thought Florida State would kind of just manhandle them if they got to play them. Then who else did Loyola play? They played Kansas State. They blew them out because they're just a smaller West Virginia type team. So you're kind of playing lighter versions of other tournament teams that are low seeds, and they're able to go ahead and get these big upset wins, which, I'm happy for them. But now you're going to face in the Final Four, you're going to face a team that's definitely more talented than you and more athletic, whether it be Florida State or Michigan, and just turns out to be Michigan. So I'm still sticking to my guns. I think they're going to get in. And on the other side of the bracket, it's going to be a bummer because even if Loyola pulls off the upset and makes it to the national championship, like you said before the game to me, Matt, it's probably going to be a blowout. Because on the other side of the bracket, you have 2 teams that have been recruiting well, both named in the FBI probe. And I tweeted that out too because Duke was also mentioned. So I said, doesn't matter if Duke or Kansas wins this game. One side of the bracket's going to have cheaters in it, and the other side of the bracket's going to have these upstarts. And I joked with you because ESPN wrote an article calling Michigan a blue blood. It was like 3 blue bloods and 1 unknown or something like that. I forget what the actual headline was, but to me, Michigan, they've never considered Michigan a blue blood. Maybe the Fab 5 days, but there's never been okay, you're going to get a bunch of 5-star recruits. Nope. Other than those 2 years, that's never happened. So you're looking at contrasting styles here. If Florida State would have got in, it would have been the same thing. You're looking at a football school, basically, that basketball is kind of an afterthought in the grand scheme of things, playing 2 basketball schools which are actively cheating, trying to bring in the best players because basketball is what makes them their money. You think Kansas is going to bring in a lot of money with football when they go 0-12? Almost every year? I can't even remember. There was one year, what was it, 2008? When they made a run in the Big 12? Did they make a
Gino.
BCS? Yeah, they made a BCS bowl game that 1 year in my entire life. That's the only year I remember Kansas ever doing anything. And Villanova obviously doesn't have a football school. So it's going to be interesting. Do you have any thoughts on these going in?
Not really. My bracket's completely destroyed now that Duke had to choke in overtime. So there went that.
Well, we did have the Southbound Sports Group, and we do have one member that's sitting right now very close to the 100%, and they have Michigan winning the national championship. Unfortunately, it's not me. But if Michigan wins, then I think they're in the drawing for the free car or free cars or whatever the prizes are ESPN gives away. I think one's a trip to Hawaii. So, like I said, go blue, get to the national championship. Anything can happen. Unfortunately, they're going to be outmanned no matter who they play. So, just hope for one of those hot shooting nights, and maybe Beeline can bring up some magic and make up. It just sucks that in 2013 they played cheaters, and in 2018 they'll be playing cheaters. So that's basketball for you. Any other thoughts?
Well, I do think that Michigan probably falls into that blue bloodline, being that they played for they played for national championships in basketball relatively recently. I mean, when you look at their last real national championship was in the 20s for football.
Whoa, 1997, Matt.
Again, we're not going there, but I said legitimate.
That's legitimate. That's the AP. That's the number one. That's not no coaches pool.
I just showed up.
That's not no coaches pool where you have to beg for votes by other coaches. Tom Osborne. Hashtag.
Participation trophy. I can't help it that they handed out participation trophies. Michigan got one. Nebraska got one. Des Moines City School of the Blind got one.
Hey, we'll take one. They were Beeline said he wouldn't accept the 2013 national championship trophy, but I would. Make it say
I'm sure someone else will eventually.
Last team standing. Last team standing bought no prostitutes. I'd love it if they even put that on the banner. But I mean they've been in the championship like you said, but it's a poor record. Is it the Final Four? I think they've been in 8 Final Fours. I think they're 6-2, and these is going by my memory, so I could be wrong. And I think they're 1-5 in national championship games, with the lone win being Glenn Rice 1989. Then you have the 2 Fab Five losses, one to Duke, one to North Carolina on the Chris Webber Phantom timeout. 2013 was a loss, and I think they lost one other one. But I did want to mention that going back to the hockey thing, I sent you guys, there's been 6 teams to make the Final Four and the Frozen Four in the same year. It's been Michigan, 1964, 1992, 1993, and 2018 now. And Michigan State, 1999 and 2001. And I just wanted to say, I was a little surprised Ohio State's not on here, because they're supposed to be better at basketball than us, and you would think that they would make a few Frozen Fours. There's not that many teams in Division I hockey, but kind of embarrassing that little brother Michigan State's on there twice, and no mention of Ohio State. So I'll end my Final Four with that tidbit. Matt, you have anything else?
Nope, that's it.
All right, let's get into Major League Baseball opening day. I mentioned it earlier. Rick's been at spring training. He sent some funny tidbits. I want to put that together for a Southbound Sports Report episode. He said Bartolo Colon's out of shape, which no shit. I could have told you that when the Atlanta Braves signed him to that big extension a few years ago. He's awful. So make sure you check that out. I'll be putting those out there to hear Rick's thoughts, and we'll get into this a little bit next week after we see it. Major League Baseball season, there weren't enough moves for me to think that it's going to be any different. And I was trying to look at the last couple, last couple postseasons. You're starting to see a similar same teams make the runs in the playoffs. You have the Chicago Cubs win it 2 years ago. They go to the NLCS. You have the Yankees for some reason. Everyone kind of discredits them at the beginning of the year, but they're just able to spend and spend and spend where they can make the playoffs. Like last year, they shouldn't even have been in. But then you have the Astros and the AL kind of come up. But then you still have the same teams competing. The Indians. Did the Indians make it last year? Yeah, they won their division. They were in after they lost in the championship game. You're always going to have the Red Sox. The Dodgers was a big team. They made the playoffs. They were in the NLCS 2 years ago, and they were in it again. And I'm thinking I'm going to go with the same similar teams. You're going to have probably the Indians win the AL Central. You're going to have the Cubs win the NL Central. I know is there going to be a push from some of the other teams? Probably, but those two divisions I see as locked up. And I'll circle back around and get your thoughts, Matt, because I know you're a Cardinals guy. From the West, it's probably going to be the same two teams. You're going to have the Astros back at it. They're built for a few years run here. They got their World Series last year on their first year of that run. What's stopping them from going 2 or 3 years? And in the NL West, you're going to have the Dodgers again because they've reached that Yankee status where they're going to spend and spend and spend and hope that something sticks. So I'm seeing the same things. These are my predictions here for opening day. You're going to have in the NL the Nationals again. The Nationals are kind of like the Capitals. Are they going to win the division? Probably. Are they going to be eliminated in the playoffs? Oh, 100%. They're definitely going to be eliminated. They're not going to win a championship because that's just a Washington type thing to do. The other Washington type things to do is to sign a bunch of quarterbacks, then trade them for no reason whenever they're good, and then have a bunch of drama for no reason. Sign a 5'8" wide receiver for $30 million. Those are just Washington things that they happen. So Nationals, they'll have a great team, get 100 wins, and they'll be bounced in the first round of the playoffs too. Some lowly team like the Marlins or someone that you're like, how did they even make the playoffs? And then on the other side, you're going to have the Yankees and the Red Sox because if I were the Orioles, they've made a run a few years ago. I think they made the playoffs. Or the Rays or the Blue Jays. I would just petition to get out of that division because I think they could have success somewhere else. And maybe it's time that you kind of just do a haves versus a have-nots where you have all the giants in one side, the Yankees, the Blue Jays, or the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, all these teams that have a ton of money that they're just going to go ahead and spend. And then you have it just like David versus Goliath. That's what they should do, just two different divisions. Because right now how it's set up, it's going to be the same teams. I can predict these. And then the wild cards, I don't even care about. Because someone could make a run, but what's going to say is the Red Sox or the Yankees, who's going to be the wild card now that there's two? Because most likely it's going to be one of them every year. But that's a very cynical view of it. Probably because the Pirates have no chance. The Detroit Tigers, friends of the show, we have some merch from them. They are in the middle of a rebuild, so we don't even have any excitement on the AL side for me. Maybe pull for the Indians just because they're close, but as a Pittsburgh guy, can you really hope that Cleveland wins, especially now that they have the LeBron thing and they have all this drama? No. They had the Manziel thing, the Browns. It's already over for me. So I can't really pull for them either. Plus, they're changing their mascot. They're getting rid of that. Just a bad opening day for me. Matt, what are your thoughts on this?
I sent you the picture or the screenshot I took earlier. I know it's spring training and there's not really a whole lot to buy into with that, but the Cards had one of the lowest ERAs from their pitching staff throughout spring training. So I think that's a very good sign for them going forward. One of the issues that seems to happen with St. Louis is they've had issues with their pitching, particularly in the relief end. It seemed like in years past they were getting consistent late inning relief help, but this year it was like our starting pitchers would get them through the first 6-7 innings, and then it was hold your breath because you turn it over to the bullpen and suddenly it turned into batting practice. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do. I saw that Mott was let go. There's a possibility that they may try to bring him back on the cheap if no one else claims him. But that was pretty much the big thing that I saw. I think that there is a possibility that they can give a little bit of a push to the Cubs and the Brewers in the Central. I think a lot of it's just going to depend on who gets hot down the stretch. I mean, I think you almost look at that the way we're looking at the NHL playoffs right now. It's who's going to get hot down the stretch and who's going to just take the the leadership spot there. I think it could be a coin flip this early in the year.
Yeah, when I'm looking at these teams, Cardinals are always one of the ones that were usually right there. So they're one of the ones that I would have on my watch list as a team that could make a push just because their front office has been so good. I honestly have them slotted above the Brewers. I know some other people. Rick's very high on the Brewers, and I'll probably talk about some of his stuff. So me and Rick are in a fantasy baseball league. We haven't been talking about fantasy for a while, but I wanted to just I was hoping he'd be back. We could give our strategies. My strategy for Major League Baseball and for fantasy is the same. If you want to win, you have to sign winners. And in baseball, winners are guys that are taking performance-enhancing drugs. Let's be honest. It's going to be those guys that have been caught. I draft Arenado, what's that guy, Chapman? I draft him every single year because if he's out with PED busted for the first couple months of the season, that's okay because he'll be back and he was pitching for the Yankees the one year and then he's pitching for the Cubs. He's going to get saves. Who else did I always just sign guys like that. Anyone that's under like the people suspect, like Eric Thames, go ahead and get him. Just draft him because why not? He could be boom or bust. But if you're on the line, like Sammy Sosa, if you remember, he got caught for performance enhancing drugs. Then what happened? He had to lay low. So what did he do? He corked his bat. He was always going for that edge. You knew he was going to take that extra step and get your team the win. So that's what I go ahead and do when I'm doing fantasy baseball. Not a whole lot. I actually like to load up on closers so much that Rick changed the rules on me this year, and he's not here to defend himself, so I can go ahead and fire at him. He changed the rules on me this year so that I can only have one closing pitcher because I would load up on him, and I would get guys that would have saves. And then whenever your starting pitcher like Jose Fernandez just dies in the middle of the year, you can make up for it with closers. Because those are lights out guys that if you can scout them good, and maybe you're in a league where you have 2 or 3 of them, if you're wondering what should I go for, wins or saves, wins are way more unpredictable because you have to have guys that can hit the ball, whatever, anything can happen. If your closer gets in the game, he's only going to be pitching if they have a chance to get the save. So go for this closer's number one. Your starting pitcher you could have the best starting pitcher in the league. But if your team can't hit for shit, he's not going to get any wins. He'll just get no decisions. And you need to get wins. So I always go for closers over starters. That's another little tidbit. I know you don't play fantasy baseball, Matt, but if you did, what would be your strategies here?
Well, for a little bit I was involved in it, and my strategy was essentially pick St. Louis Cardinals because you know they're going to be winners, especially when playoffs hit. They always seem to be a team that was in the midst of a playoff hunt. So even if you're not a St. Louis fan, take players from teams that you know are going to be in the playoffs because those are usually the times of year where as your playoffs hit, those are going to be players that are going to be getting hot so that they can help their teams in the playoffs. So I think it kind of helps there.
That's a good strategy because my other one that I look at is what are teams that you hate? A lot of people hate the Yankees because they're always good. Draft players on those teams because they're always good for a reason. Like Matt said, they're winners. So if you have a guy on their team that's constantly getting home runs, yeah, you can be like, goddamn, the Yankees, they won again. But you're like, but my guy had 4 home runs because they have their field set up for weak left-handed hitters to just hit little home run dinks. Like who they bring? They had that one year they had like 8 left-handed hitters just because they built their ballpark like a piece of shit where people can't even see the game. So, and then of course they have a bowl game there, Pinstripe Bowl, where they sell you full price tickets that are hidden by the concession stand. Classic. What a great game. I'm just glad Michigan doesn't play in that one. But I'm looking at this and some of the teams, I don't know what they're doing. Like Oakland, they're under. So definitely stay away from Oakland guys. Stay away from Pirate guys and stay away from Marlin guys this year just because of the reason the Major League Baseball's Players Association is investigating these teams because they cut a lot of their veteran guys, their star players. So if they're cut enough guys that Major League Baseball is looking into them, they're not going to have a good year. Let's just be honest. So those would be my bottom 3 teams. And I'm just picking them for that reason. I think it was the Athletics, the Marlins, and of course our Pirates. R.I.P. if I had, I wanted to fly the Jolly Roger when I set up the studio, which I'm not 100% done yet. And then when the Pirates, they get eliminated from the playoffs, I'd put it at half mast. I would be putting it at half mast on opening day because they'll take the L, and I'll just go out and fly the flag at half mast. And maybe I'll just do that. Maybe I'll get one and go ahead and do that because that's how much faith I have in this season. It's 0. Anything else you want to add on Major League Baseball, Matt?
No, I think you've pretty much covered it for me.
All right, last little bit of the show. I know we're doing a lot of little topics because only me and Matt today. I wanted to hit on the NFL draft just because there's some crazy storylines. The first thing I wanted to bring up was Johnny Manziel, just because he was at the Michigan Texas A&M game. Was that last Thursday? Yeah, I think we played Thursday and Saturday. He was at the game, talking a lot of trash on the guys, and then he took to Twitter after the game, and I thought, okay, here's going to be old Johnny talking shit. Now he congratulated the team, was like, hey, make sure you work hard, do things like this, you're doing things the right way, hope we're cheering for you. Go ahead, read his Twitter, because it looks like he might be cleaned up, and ironically, I didn't tell Matt or share the Michigan thing, but then Matt sends me a video, and what'd you say today? You said something like, you're buying into the new Manziel.
You know, I saw the video, and I appreciate the fact that he's been as candid and he's been as open. And I think one of the big lines that I was hearing from him that I wasn't hearing in the Colin Kaepernick debate was that Manziel wasn't demanding a starting spot. He wasn't demanding anything. He wanted an opportunity to play again, just to prove himself. And he's already said, if an NFL team doesn't want me, that's fine. I'm going to sign in Canada. I'm going to play in the spring developmental league. I'm going to make myself better because I want to improve it. He announced that, he had some mental health issues, which, I'm very biased to with my profession, that I'm a licensed professional counselor. And I think that if you're thinking, do I have mental illness? Am I crazy? Get yourself checked. It's easier to get an evaluation and rule those things out than to be acting crazy. And I think when you look at Manziel, he was doing some crazy stuff. And if he's now properly being medicated and being managed and getting that extra support, why wouldn't you take to his story or take a shot at him if he's cleaning up his antics off the field? It may help him on the field as well.
And I want to give a shout out to A&M because they let Manziel throw at their pro day. And there's no way that they have to do that. They have a brand new coach, Jimbo Fisher. So it's looking like, think about it, how many other teams would distance theirself or programs would distance theirself from a player with issues like this? And instead, A&M says, hey, this is going to send a message to recruits all across the country because they can point to and say, hey, you might be coming from a troubled background. You might have this going on. You might have that going on. But if you come to Aggie land, and I'm hard on the Aggies, I always make fun of them because it's easy to kick a dog when they're down. That's a joke because they have a collie as a mascot if you don't know who A&M is. But they have every reason not to invite this guy back. And instead, they go ahead and they bring him back. And I think it's a class act. They might be given, either way, it's going to work both ways. Because I could go ahead and play devil's advocate and say, well, they're only doing that to get A&M's name out there. But realistically, how many people care about Manziel anymore? But the fact of the matter is, they made money off him because they were trademarking all his Manziel, the trademark lines or whatever he was doing. He had the guns fired. They made a ton of money off him. And for them to come back and be like, hey, you're part of the family. Did he leave early? I don't even know if he got his degree there. Maybe he's working on it. I hope they're able to let him come back. He can get a degree, and then he could basically be a spokesperson for A&M and people that have issues. And I think that would open a lot of doors for A&M into the houses of potential recruits because they can look at moms and dads of kids and say, hey, look, if your kid struggles, what is going to happen at these other schools? They're going to kick him out and push him to JUCO. They're going to push him here. They're going to push him there. And look, we're giving our guy We love him. We're family here. We're giving him another chance at the NFL. And he's going to come in here and he's going to work hard. He's not going to make an ass of himself. He just wants to play. And like you said, he'll play spring league and anything else. And I don't want to forget to mention it because I think I did last week. My dream league, the XFL, there's a new competitor. Did you hear about that?
Yes, I did.
That's supposedly going to start next year and has backing from guess who? The NFL. That tells you one thing. The NFL is scared of the XFL. So
and it has two of our own. It has Hines Ward and Troy Polamalu as spokesman for it.
Yeah. And so they're getting the Players Association and all these other guys are like, wait a second. If the NFL goes the way of, what was that other league that they made the thing of?
USFL.
USFL that Trump was in, yeah. So if the NFL goes the way of that, who's going to remember these Hall of Fame guys and these All-Star guys? No one's going to care about that league. So they have to go ahead and they have to get ahead of it. So that tells you that the NFL is definitely afraid because they know that the XFL can work. So it's going to be something to keep an eye out. And maybe who would be better for that league than Johnny Manziel? Because if you want to bring guys in, bring in any quarterback that people had an attachment to. Baker Mayfield's already saying he's one of the best in the draft. Is he going to get a fair shake? I mean, probably not. People are saying Sam Darnold's the number one pick. What the hell is wrong with people, Matt? Are they watching the same film as us?
No, they're not, because they're the same people that had Josh Rosen as the number 2 quarterback. And then make Baker Mayfield at 3 and Josh Allen at 4.
Yeah, well, I wonder how much of it is just money, because they're just picking the biggest schools and they're like, oh, USC? He has to be great. We're just going to put him up there. And in Wyoming, they're like, do we really want kids looking at Wyoming? Probably not. So let's just slot him down a few. Because it's happened before. It happened with our own Ben Roethlisberger. A lot of people were mad that the Steelers drafted Roethlisberger so early because he came from Miami, Ohio. He didn't come from Miami, University of Miami, the Hurricanes. No, he came from Miami, Ohio. Well, what's their mascot now? I think they changed it because of the Native American thing. They're like the Red Hawks.
I thought they're the Red Hawks.
Yeah. So people were mad because he wasn't from a big school, and look how that worked out. So I don't know. I just think that these analysts, they need to bring up these guys from big schools because they know the alumni base is going to tune into the show to hear them talk about a fellow Trojan, or people that are USC fans are going to be like, oh, okay, USC, South California, we're looking at LA as an area with UCLA. So you have the biggest market, the second biggest market in America, the biggest market on the West Coast. And we're going to go ahead and just talk about those two guys because we know we can get people to just tune in. And I think that's what's going to happen. And I really hope that the NFL isn't thinking along those same lines, because I could really see them. This would be something that would happen. This conspiracy me kicking right here. Who has awful attendance out there? The LA Chargers. What if they went ahead and groomed someone to replace Phillip Rivers, or something crazy happened where either them or the Rams brought one of those two guys in, just because they're thinking, let's keep a local kid here. Let's keep a guy that we're going to put his name out there early, and then maybe there'll be a draft day trade or something crazy. That's my conspiracy, so keep an eye on that, because I don't think there's no way. If a GM drafts Sam Darnold number 1, fired immediately. Then I made fun of the Browns. That's the most Browns move of all time. Their fans they burn LeBron's jerseys when he left. They should just burn any Browns gear. They should just have a town. What would they had? They had a losers parade last year. They should just have a town bonfire where people just come and they burn all their old Browns memorabilia, because I would go to that just to cover it for Southbound Sports. So if they put that together, I'll drive up there and I'll cover a Browns bonfire. What do you think?
I pretty much agree with you. The one thing with the spring league that I had heard from the NFL is that they realized that a lot of people cash in during the fantasy season for football specifically, and it kind of dies out with some of the other sports, and they're worried that if the XFL gets into it and they take advantage of the fantasy aspect where people aren't necessarily following a team, but they're following certain players and they're following things like that, that if they don't cash in, then the XFL is making that extra money. They can put together a league where they're taking some of these guys that maybe aren't drafted, who end up getting cut. There's only so many spots available on these NFL rosters, 53-man rosters, that they can kind of have a holding tank for some of these guys, let them develop in a spring league that then they can transition maybe a little bit easier to the NFL. Instead of being out of football a year or two and then trying to make a team, they still have something where they're being competitive. If they're not drafted, if they decide to declare early, that they can get into one of these developmental leagues and potentially earn their way onto an NFL roster.
That's a good point. And I wanted to bring up, I was in one of those leagues for a basketball, and it's too hard to be in a competitive league because of the Tim Duncan rule, where they randomly just sit star players at the drop of a hat. It's much easier to get those injury reports and things from the NFL, if we're being honest, because you have one game a week to focus on. And yeah, if you're going to put money into it, you want to have the chance and the feeling that you're going to win. And with the NBA, when I played, they would just randomly just have guys DNP after the game starts. They're like, oh, that sixth man, he's not going to come in today. Thanks for the heads up, guys. And that's why the XFL can definitely fill that void. So you might be onto something there. And we're going to bring that back up. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here. I don't want to go too long. We were going long the past couple weeks. My last thing I wanted to touch on, and then I'll get yours, was Odell Beckham. He's on, or Beckham Jr., OBJ. He's on the trading block. The Giants are like, hey, guys, just so you know, we don't care. Like, he's on the trading block. And you know what this smells like? A Redskins move. I hinted at it earlier when they signed like these wide receivers for no reason. This is a pure Redskins move to do. They're in the big media market. Who would eat it up more than Redskins fans? Oh, we got OBJ, and he's a cancer. Let's be honest. I would love to see the Redskins, now that they're getting rid of Cousins or whoever, go after OBJ and Le'Veon Bell. Because it would be the dream team.
That is a Dan Snyder power move.
It's a dream team of cancers. You're just like, hey guys, who doesn't want to practice? Hey guys, who wants to do flash dance commercials after this practice here? We're getting ready for other teams are getting ready for the playoffs. We're thinking about doing a flash dance commercial. We're gonna have Eli Manning in it. It's gonna be funny. OBJ's first hand up. I'll do it. It would just be the most Redskins thing of all time. I would say the Browns could do it or something like that. And the Raiders, if they had just got released from jail, the Raiders or Cowboys could be in there. But the fact that they're just locker room cancers, like, look at me, guys, it screams Redskins. They've won some games, so it's not a Browns move. A Browns move would be like trading for an injured guy after like he's coming back from double ACL surgery and they spend $20 million or a first round pick on him. That's a Browns move. A Redskins move is this. You're not sure how much longer the guys can perform. I know OBJ's coming off an injury type deal, and they just sign him. And then they're like, we don't know why it didn't work out. We have two great guys, and we just traded our quarterback, got rid of our quarterback, but we have this other guy come in. We're just going to bring in 3 power weapons. So that's my last thing. That's what I want to see happen. Redskins, make your season one for the ages. Get OBJ, get Le'Veon Bell, and let's do this. Matt, anything you have to end this show?
How the hell do I follow that up? It was pretty much my thoughts exactly. On a much smaller scale, though. I look from the perspective of outside of the Redskins. What team with a functioning brain, watching him like wrestle with the kicking net and like dropping passes and getting caught with like what appears to be prostitutes and drugs, it's like that's exactly the person that we need to make this team go. The other option is either Cincinnati or Dallas, because they both like taking those players that then end up with legal issues. There's a possibility that Des Bryant might end up be out in Dallas. That might be the move, that you can get rid of one cancer and you can bring on another so that it's the same team.
And then they'll wonder why they're eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. They're like, but look, we signed these guys. You're right. It could be a Bengals move. Definitely not a Browns move. Could be a Bengals move. And then the Bengals, man, I don't know. I'm looking forward to the NFL draft, though. I will say that. So any other final thoughts on the show?
Nope, just getting excited for the draft coming up and seeing who our Steelers are going to take.
All right, big week coming up. Final Four, go blue. Hopefully they can get that and the Frozen Four down. It'd be cool to at least play in the national championship. I don't know if that's been done by both in the same year. Major League Baseball will be kicking off. We'll be getting into that. And next week's show, I have some of the stuff written down, looking at some of the hockey stuff, and the NHL preview will be coming up. So thanks for listening. Follow us on Twitter, S-Bound Sports, Facebook and Instagram, Southbound Sports. I'm personally starting to make sure we post more on there. And subscribe on iTunes. The Southbound Sports Show and the Southbound Sports Report. I'll be throwing up some of Rick's coverage of spring training in the next coming days. So thanks, and we will see you next week.